Roman history is not merely a past in which chronological events are lined up, it was an empire where power, ambition, fear, and transformation took the stage. This history witnessed repeated rises and equally shattering collapses. However, within this long process, there are certain figures who not only affect their own era but personally change the course of history. Julius Caesar is one of those rare individuals who emerged at precisely such a breaking point in Roman history and redirected the course of an age toward another direction. His life story is the dramatic narrative of the internal disintegration of the Roman Republic, the transcendence of traditional institutions by individual genius, and ultimately the concentration of the fate of the state in the will of a single man. To understand Caesar is not merely to examine the life of a great commander or a successful politician, it is also to comprehend why Rome abandoned its centuries-long republican tradition and transitioned to an imperial system. Julius Caesar was born in 100 BC into the Julii family, a deeply rooted Roman lineage that had lost its former material splendor. This family was one of the ancient lines of the Roman aristocracy and traced its origins mythologically to the goddess Venus. Such a lineage narrative led Caesar, from his childhood years onward, to feel different from an ordinary Roman. However, in Rome, possessing an aristocratic lineage did not, by itself, mean political power. Although the republican system was theoretically presented as an order that defended popular sovereignty, in practice it functioned in line with the interests of a few powerful families in the Senate. Caesar was born into this structure, and at a young age he recognized the gap between the system's apparent ideals and its real operation. This awareness is extremely important for understanding why he would later challenge the institutions of the Republic. The first major rupture in the life of the young Caesar occurred during the period of Sulla, who seized power in Rome with dictatorial authority. Sulla was a figure who ruthlessly eliminated his rivals and attempted to reshape the Republic under his own authority. Caesar's family and marriage were connected to Sulla's enemies. For this reason, Sulla demanded that Caesar divorce his wife. Although this request might have seemed like an ordinary concession required to survive in Roman politics, it was unacceptable to Caesar. He disobeyed the order and nearly paid for it with his life. Forced to flee Rome, Caesar was shaped during these years of exile not only physically but also mentally. He learned the nature of power, the effect of fear on politics, and how vital patience could be as a weapon. These years quietly but firmly laid the foundations of the understanding of power he would later establish. The pirate incident he experienced during his years of exile reveals Caesar's personality and his view of authority in its barest form. When he was captured by pirates while traveling in the Mediterranean, he did not display the fear and helplessness that most Roman aristocrats would have shown. On the contrary, he bargained with the pirates, said that he found the ransom too low and asked them to increase it, and constantly reminded them of who he was. After being released, he kept his word, he returned to Rome, had the pirates captured, and punished them. This incident symbolizes Caesar's understanding of power. Authority exists not only by being demanded, but by being ruthlessly enforced when necessary. When a challenge goes unanswered, power collapses. When Caesar returned to Rome, the Republic was in deep crisis. The Senate had turned into a closed structure that protected aristocratic interests, while the people were being crushed under debt, unemployment, and inequality. Social tension manifested itself in major eruptions such as the Spartacus Revolt. Although this rebellion was suppressed by Crassus, Caesar drew a different lesson from the event. To him, Spartacus was not merely a slave leader, but a clear sign that the Roman order had become unsustainable. During this period, Caesar positioned himself close to the lower classes through populist policies and advanced in Roman politics with cautious yet determined steps. The Republic was theoretically founded on freedom and balance, however, in practice this balance had long been broken. The Senate had become incapable of thinking of anything other than protecting its own privileges. Caesar saw very clearly that this structure had lost its legitimacy in the eyes of the people. It was precisely here that the governorship of Gaul represented not merely a military duty for him, but a great opportunity that would determine his fate in Roman politics. The Gallic campaigns were a long and arduous process in which Caesar fully revealed his military and political genius. During these campaigns, which lasted for years, Caesar struggled not only against enemy tribes but also against hunger, harsh natural conditions, and discipline problems within his army. However, the most important trait that distinguished him from other Roman generals was the strong bond he established with his soldiers. He was a commander who marched through the same mud, shivered in the same cold, and distributed the spoils fairly. This approach created an extraordinary loyalty within the Roman army. Caesar's soldiers were loyal to him not merely because he was their commander, but because they believed he understood them. The peak of Gallic resistance was the Battle of Alesia. The Gallic tribes united under the leadership of Vercingetorix put forth their last great resistance against Rome here. The double envelopment strategy Caesar employed was unique in military history. He simultaneously brought under control both the enemy inside the city and the relief forces that would come from outside. After days of hunger, despair, and bloody clashes, Gallic resistance collapsed. With the fall of Alesia, Gaul definitively entered Roman domination, and Caesar became Rome's most powerful general. Caesar did not confine his military successes solely to the battlefields. With his work commentaries on the Gallic Wars, he presented these achievements to the Roman people. Although the work appears to use a simple and objective language, it was in fact a masterfully constructed propaganda text. Caesar portrayed himself as an indispensable leader for Rome and indirectly neutralized the Senate's criticisms. In his hands, the pen became a weapon as effective as the sword. Caesar's brilliant successes in Gaul and his steadily increasing prestige in the eyes of the Roman people led to a deep and growing fear within the Senate. The Roman Republic was theoretically a system based on the separation of powers and the principle of balance. However, Caesar's rise fundamentally shook this delicate equilibrium. For the senators, the main threat was not merely that Caesar was a military leader. What made him truly dangerous was that he had become legitimate in the eyes of the people, indispensable in the eyes of the army, and unstoppable in the eyes of his political rivals. As Caesar's popularity increased, the Senate began to see him no longer as a citizen of the Republic but as a potential tyrant. This perception brought attempts to politically encircle Caesar and limit his powers. The Senate's aim was to neutralize Caesar under the claim of protecting the Republic. However, these initiatives were, without realizing it, pushing Rome to the brink of a greater conflict. This tension reached its peak on the banks of the Rubicon River in 49 BC. According to Roman law, a general entering Italian territory with his army was an absolute crime. The Senate's demand that Caesar disband his army appeared to be a legal request, but in reality it was a move that would end his political life. For Caesar, this order meant either submission or open rebellion. After a brief hesitation, crossing the Rubicon was not merely a military maneuver but a conscious challenge against the Roman Republic. The phrase, "the die is cast," symbolized that there was no turning back. This step marked the official beginning of years-long civil wars in Rome and the process of the Republic's dissolution. The policy Caesar followed during the Civil War clearly reveals how he perceived power. When he entered Rome, he did not embark on a bloody path of revenge as many expected. On the contrary, he adopted the profile of a leader who pardoned his rivals and declared a general amnesty. This attitude transformed Caesar into a legitimate savior in the eyes of both the people and the undecided senators. Caesar preferred to rule not by destroying his enemies, but by making them indebted to him. This approach was one of the clearest indicators of his political intelligence. After being defeated in the Civil War, Pompeius Magnus' flight to Egypt carried the Roman internal conflict to the eastern Mediterranean. However, Pompeius's murder in Egypt by the advisors of the young King Ptolemy XIII was an unexpected and disturbing development for Caesar. Caesar wanted to defeat his rival on the battlefield, not before the Senate. The severed head of Pompeius being presented to him was, in Caesar's eyes, contrary to Roman traditions and the sense of honor. This event unwillingly drew Caesar into the complex court intrigues of Egypt. At this time, Egypt was shaken by an internal dynastic power struggle. In the Ptolemaic dynasty, the throne could not be shared between Ptolemy XIII and his sister Cleopatra. Cleopatra had been expelled from the palace but had not relinquished her claim to the throne. Caesar's arrival in Egypt created a unique opportunity for her. According to legend, Cleopatra secretly appeared before Caesar and succeeded in impressing him with her intelligence, political foresight, and personal charm. However, it would be incomplete to evaluate this relationship merely as a romantic bond. For Cleopatra, Caesar was the key to regaining her throne and protecting Egypt's independence against Rome. For Caesar, Cleopatra was a powerful ally who could secure Rome's interests in the eastern Mediterranean. With Caesar's support, Cleopatra returned to the Egyptian throne. This alliance increased Rome's influence over Egypt while also providing Caesar with economic and strategic advantages. Egypt was a vitally important source of grain for Rome, and control over this resource further reinforced Caesar's political power. The relationship he established with Cleopatra showed that Caesar was not only a soldier and a politician, but also a leader capable of reading the balances of the Eastern world. Caesar Ion, born from this union, would later become a symbolic figure in Roman politics. After completing his affairs in Egypt, Caesar turned toward Anatolia. His suppression of the rebellions there in an extremely short time once again demonstrated his military speed and determination. After the victory he won at Zela, the phrase he sent to Rome, Veni, Vidi, Vici, meaning, I came, I saw, I conquered, symbolized Caesar's unshakable confidence in himself and his superiority in warfare. From this point on, there was no organized force left in the Roman world that could stand against Caesar. When he returned to Rome, Caesar assumed dictatorial powers, and these powers were eventually extended for life. Republican institutions were still standing, however, they had largely been hollowed out. Instead of completely destroying the system, Caesar tried to fix it through reforms. He laid the foundation of the Julian calendar, which is still used today, alleviated debts, and made arrangements in provincial administration. However, far from calming the fear in the Senate, these reforms increased it even further. Because the problem was not the content of the reforms, but the concentration of the power that enacted them in a single hand. Caesar was no longer perceived in Rome as a citizen, but almost as the state itself. Caesar's acquisition of lifelong dictatorial power showed that an irreversible psychological threshold had been crossed in Rome. Although republican institutions appeared to be standing, real power had been concentrated in Caesar's person. Senate meetings continued to be held, laws were passed, and magistrates carried out their duties. However, everyone knew that the final word now belonged to Caesar. This situation represented not only a political discomfort but an existential threat, especially for aristocratic senators raised in the republican tradition. In their view, Rome was a state founded by expelling kings, and the power Caesar possessed was no different from kingship. The idea of assassination was not the result of a sudden outburst of anger, but of long-accumulated fears and ideological conflicts. A group within the Senate believed that with every day Caesar remained alive, the Republic was dying a little more. Among the members of this group were Cassius, Decimus Brutus, and most importantly Marcus Junius Brutus. Brutus's name carries a special meaning at this point. Because Brutus was not merely a senator, but a living symbol of the founding mythology of the Roman Republic. His ancestor Lucius Junius Brutus was remembered as the figure who overthrew the monarchy in Rome and founded the Republic. This lineage placed a heavy historical burden on Brutus's shoulders. Brutus's relationship with Caesar was extremely complex. Caesar had protected Brutus, pardoned him, and allowed him to rise politically. Some sources even state that Caesar saw Brutus almost as his own son and felt a special closeness toward him. Despite this, Brutus felt indebted not to Caesar, but to republican ideals. In his mind, this issue was not about personal loyalty, but about the future of Rome. Cassius, on the other hand, was a harsher, more ambitious figure who harbored a more personal hatred toward Caesar. It was largely Cassius's persistent persuasion that convinced Brutus to participate in the assassination. The time and place of the assassination were chosen with great care. Killing Caesar while he was surrounded by guards was nearly impossible. For this reason, a Senate meeting was seen as the most suitable opportunity. The meeting to be held in mid-March of 44 BC would take place in the Senate building at the Theatre of Pompey. This environment, where Caesar would be unarmed and defenseless, was ideal for the assassins. However, no matter how meticulously the plan was prepared, rumors spread quickly in Rome. Various warnings were given to Caesar about a plot against him. The soothsayers' prophecies of "Beware the Ides of March" circulated among the Roman people. On the day of the assassination, Caesar's wife Calpurnia begged him not to go to the Senate because of the bad dream she had seen. Caesar hesitated briefly, he even considered postponing the meeting. However, the mocking and provocative words of Decimus Brutus made him abandon this decision. Caesar set out for the Senate as if defying fate. This moment was the one in Roman history when tragedy was approaching with heavy steps. When he entered the Senate building, the atmosphere appeared as usual. The senators stood up to greet him. Just before the meeting began, a senator named Julius Cimber approached Caesar and presented a supposed petition. This was the signal for the attack. Cimber held Caesar's toga to restrain him. Then Casca struck the first blow. The wound was not fatal, but there was no turning back. When Caesar realized he was under attack, he tried to resist, but in a short time he was completely surrounded. The successive knife blows drenched the Senate hall in blood. When Caesar recognized his attackers, he encountered familiar faces. And he saw Brutus. This moment is the most symbolic moment of the assassination. According to ancient sources, when Caesar saw Brutus, he stopped resisting. The phrase, "You too, Brutus," although its historical accuracy is debated, immortalized this sense of betrayal. When Caesar collapsed at the foot of Pompey's statue, the symbolic heart of the Roman Republic fell to the ground with him. After killing Caesar, the assassins fell into a great delusion. They believed that the Republic had been saved. Brutus and Cassius attempted to address the people as they emerged from the Senate with bloody hands. They presented themselves as tyrant slayers and proclaimed that freedom had returned. However, the Roman people did not show the enthusiastic support they expected. On the contrary, the city sank into silence. People were frightened and unable to predict what would happen next. Caesar's popularity was far greater than the assassins had calculated. Caesar's funeral shattered this silence. The funeral speech delivered by Mark Antony deeply shook the Roman people. Antony read Caesar's will and announced that Caesar had left part of his wealth to the people. He then showed the bloody toga to the crowd. This scene caused an explosion of anger in Rome. The crowd lost control, the Senate building was set on fire, and the assassins were forced to flee Rome. For Brutus, this moment marked the beginning of tragedy. The act he undertook believing he was saving the Republic had dragged Rome into an even greater civil war. A murder committed in the name of ideals resulted in catastrophe in terms of its consequences. Brutus and Cassius fled to the east, however, a few years later they were defeated at the Battle of Philippi. Brutus accepted defeat and committed suicide. According to legend, his last words were, "Virtue, you too were only a dream." This phrase was like a confession that the ideals of the Republic had died with him. Caesar's death did not end tyranny, on the contrary, it paved the way for an even stronger one-man regime. With Octavian's rise to power as Augustus, Rome officially entered the imperial era. Brutus's dagger had not saved the Republic, it had dug its grave. Caesar's blood had forever changed the direction of Roman history. Cleopatra was in Rome when Caesar was assassinated. Realizing that the atmosphere was rapidly becoming dangerous, she returned to Egypt. Her first action there was to eliminate her rivals to the throne. Her brother and co-ruler Ptolemy XIV died shortly afterward. It is accepted that this death occurred by Cleopatra's order. Cleopatra then officially declared Caesar Ion as co-king. With this move, she both consolidated her power in Egypt and declared that she had claimed Caesar's legacy. In Rome, Caesar's death had initiated a new period of civil war. During this process, Cleopatra avoided taking sides directly, because it was unclear who would prevail. However, when Marcus Antonius, one of Caesar's closest men, began to gain power in the eastern provinces, a new opportunity emerged for Cleopatra. In 41 BC, Cleopatra met Marcus Antonius in Tarsus. This meeting became one of the most famous political encounters of the ancient world. Cleopatra presented herself not merely as a queen, but as a ruler representing the wealth and splendor of the East. She left a deep impression on Antonius. However, as with Caesar, this relationship was not only romantic, it was highly strategic. Antonius needed Egypt's economic and military support in the Roman civil wars. Cleopatra, in turn, needed to rely on a powerful Roman figure. This alliance deepened over time. Cleopatra and Antonius married and had children. Antonius granted some Roman territories in the east to Cleopatra. At this point, the balance in Rome was disrupted. Antonius's actions were skillfully turned into propaganda material by Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and heir. Octavian told the Roman people that Antonius had fallen under the spell of an Eastern queen, and was preparing to betray Rome. The final clash came in 31 BC with the Battle of Actium. The combined fleet of Antonius and Cleopatra suffered a heavy defeat against Octavian's forces. This battle was not only a military defeat, but also the end of Cleopatra's political fate. After the defeat, Cleopatra and Antonius withdrew to Egypt. However, Octavian did not relent in pursuing them. In 30 BC, Octavian entered Alexandria with his armies. Antonius committed suicide upon receiving false news that Cleopatra had died. He was brought, severely wounded, to Cleopatra's side and died in her arms. This scene is described as one of the most tragic moments of ancient history. After Antonius's death, Cleopatra came face to face with Octavian. Octavian wanted to keep her alive, because displaying Cleopatra in a triumphal procession in Rome would be the symbol of his absolute victory. Cleopatra understood this very well. To live in Rome as a chained captive was worse than death for her. For this reason, Cleopatra committed suicide in 30 BC. According to the traditional account, she ended her life with a poisonous cobra, ASP. Some sources say she used a poisonous mixture. Although how she died is not certain, it is certain that she chose death as a conscious political decision.